When the Air 3 was announced, a new version of the RC, the popular controller that came with the Mini 3 Pro series, was also announced. Ever since I saw this controller, I got extremely curious about it and its specific differences when compared to the original RC. So, if you have that same burning curiosity as me, then what we're going to do today is take a look at the exact differences, or at least every difference I can find between the RC and the RC2. Fair warning, this video is going to be thoroughly packed with information since I typically like to figure out all I can. So if that sounds good to you, then let's get going. First off, the biggest difference is going to be the price. The RC originally came in at $309, while the RC2 comes in at $369. At this point in time, you can actually find the RC for about $184 if you look in the right place. So price-wise, the RC does seem more favorable here. As it stands right now, the RC2 is only compatible with the Air 3, while the RC is compatible with all drones that came before the Air 3, with the exception of the Mini 2 SE and any drones that came before that one. Later on in this video, I do want to address any thoughts about if the RC2 will be compatible with any other drones and why I feel or think it will be or can be if DJI takes the time to make it compatible. From a design standpoint, both of these controllers do look very similar, but there are some subtle to major differences aesthetically and functionally. If you look at both controllers from the front, everything here will seem familiar with the exception that the RC2 has a darker gray color. If you still look from the front, you'll notice here that DJI has brought back the antennas, which will make for a better connection for those who have had issues with the RC. I personally haven't had any issues with the signal and range while using the RC, but either way, this should make some people happy. If you're curious about whether the joysticks fit on either or, then you're definitely in luck. DJI has not, changed the control sticks here, so you can swap them, you can change them, you can do whatever you want with them. They'll work on either the RC or the RC2. If we move over to the back, then there are some slightly but significant changes here. Starting from the top down, you'll notice that there is sort of a lip on the RC2 here, and I'm quite sure that is to flesh out the internal portion of the antenna array. Underneath this lip is where your control sticks are stored now, which isn't too much different from the original RC. You'll also notice that the logo is now placed on the lip of the RC, whereas with the RC1, it was in the center between the two buttons you have here on the back, which, by the way, those buttons haven't changed at all. Move down a little bit more and you'll notice that the RC2 has two vents, one of which is actually for the exhaust from the fan that now comes in the RC2. There is a change when it comes to the two screw threads on both of these controllers. On the RC2, they seem to be closer together, while on the RC, they were spread apart. For someone like me, this is kind of annoying because I did purchase this attachment here to make it so that I could have a lanyard attached to my RC, and now it doesn't fit on the RC2, which means I'll have to search for another one if and when this controller becomes compatible with the drones I currently fly. When you look at the top of both controllers, you'll notice that there are some differences here. The RC2 has sort of an indented portion right here, which again, I'm pretty sure has to do with the antenna array within this controller. The button configurations up here are the same. However, the RC2 now has plastic dials as opposed to the metal ones on the RC. This is honestly something that seems like a subtle difference, but some people may actually feel it depending on how sensitive they are to textures. The bottom of both controllers also has some similarities and differences here. The RC2 now has an exposed SD card slot and also an exposed USB-C slot. The RC2 also only has one USB Type-C port, whereas the RC came with a covered slot that had been protecting the SD card slot as well as the USB Type-C host port. There was also one more Type-C slot, which was strictly used for charging, something I just found out. I have one more thing to talk about concerning these two ports down here, but I'll get to that in the connectivity portion of this video. The RC2 must have been doing some sit-ups or something because it has put on 30 grams more than the RC. The RC2 weighs 420 grams total versus the RC, which weighs 390 grams total. Honestly, I can't really feel the weight difference here at all, so don't think about this too much. If you were hoping for some kind of display upgrade, then unfortunately, the only thing that is new here is that the screen on the RC2 now has a cold temperature as opposed to a warm one like on the RC. I personally never had anything to compare the RC2, but I am a fan of having screens in a cooler temperature, as I do think it's easier on the eyes. Aside from that difference, the display specifications for both of these controllers are the exact same, which means you get the same resolution, which is capped at 1920 by 1080, the same screen size, which is still 5.5 inches, the same maximum frame rate, which is still 60 frames per second, and you have a max brightness of 700 nits and still 10 points of multi-touch functionality. The next thing that's pretty different here is the internals, which is obviously something you're not going to see, but I will say that you would definitely feel. There is no doubt that the original RC was a godsend and something that made flying even more convenient, but I have to say that my biggest gripe with it was that it was pretty slow in operation depending on the conditions you were using it in and what you were asking it to do. Things like switching cameras or bringing up menus would show lag and slow down in cases where I really wish this didn't happen. The RC2 uses a new, more powerful CPU and GPU. I'm not too sure which one since I couldn't really find that information, but I don't really care since now this performs the way it should have performed originally. The other thing that appears to be different with the internals is that there is now a new internal array setup like I mentioned before. The RC2 now has a 4 antenna, 2 transmitter, and 4 receiver setup, whereas the original RC had a 2 antenna, 1 transmitter, 2 receiver setup. So basically everything is doubled in the RC2, which makes sense for something with a higher number attached to its name. Another significant thing here is the fact that the internal storage has gone up from 8 gigabytes to 32 gigabytes. This should definitely provide some use when it comes to storing files without an SD card, and definitely when it comes to your flight records, which I've had to deal with having to remove more on the RC due to its limited internal space. You've also got upgraded Wi-Fi in the RC2. The RC2 now uses Wi-Fi 6 specifications, whereas the RC used Wi-Fi 4 specifications. The RC2 now also comes with Bluetooth 5.2, whereas the original RC came with Bluetooth 4.2. As far as video transmission goes, and yes, pun intended, the RC2 now uses 04 transmission, whereas the RC used up to 03 plus transmission. 04 transmission seems to be still capped at 1080p 60 frames per second, but there is obviously the difference between the range here since you do get 20 kilometers with the 04 transmission, at least in the US. So I've been pretty much teasing it, but now I'm ready to talk about connectivity. So when I say connectivity, I'm referring to things like physical and logical. In terms of the physical, I mentioned before that the RC2 comes with only one USB Type-C port. I also said before that this may not seem significant, but the reason that it is because one piece of functionality I loved about the RC was the fact that you could insert a flash drive into the host port and grab whatever files you had on that controller, like screenshots, screen recordings, and just videos you stored on there. When it comes to the RC2, I can't really tell if DJI is just being vague and maybe just didn't put the host functionality logo on this port, but as it stands right now, when I insert a flash drive into the RC2, absolutely nothing happens. And this is even after an update. There's no notification that the controller has acknowledged an external device has been put in there. You can't see it in the file management menu. You can't get to it. It just doesn't work at all, and this is extremely disappointing. However, all hope doesn't actually seem lost, as I did try to connect this controller to my computer and was extremely surprised that I was actually able to read the storage within it on my computer. Something you couldn't do and still can't do to my knowledge with the original RC. I did try to take this a step further and connect it to my phone physically, but surprise, that didn't work at all. Again, like with the flash drive, there was no acknowledgement that the controller was there, but this might be less of a big deal because not everybody's crazy like me and carries around a Type-C to C cable at any given time. I'd imagine that because the RC2 can connect to a computer, that it might just be a matter of a software update to allow it to read a flash drive, but I could be wrong since USB Type-C is one of the most confusing specifications out there. And because it also depends on what iteration DJI used in this controller. If it is any consolation, then you can opt to transfer files to a mobile device or even your computer via Bluetooth, since now this controller does have Bluetooth 5.2, which should make those Bluetooth transfers a bit faster. From the software side of things, nothing has changed here also. You're still basically limited to the pre-installed DJI Fly app on this controller and can't use the full Android operating system. As you might know, the only way to do this is by purchasing the RC Pro, but like I said in another video, that thing will cost you an arm, a leg, and a soul and your first child. One slight difference I did find in the software is that it does seem that the RC2 has been updated with Android 11 when compared to Android 9 on the RC. I only found this out and assume so because when you get into the file manager portion of the software, you can see that the file explorer is different. There's actually still a way to get to the file manager you're used to, if anybody even does this, but this does seem like DJI's proprietary file manager, since you can still access the standard Android file manager if you poke around a bit. I'm just going to throw this out there. Let me know if you want to see a video about how to transfer files from both of these controllers without having to go through the way DJI wants you to. The RC2 does have a bigger battery, or rather two batteries that equate to a larger overall total capacity. The RC2 has two 3100 milliamp hour batteries, which in total equates to 6200 milliamp hours. The RC also has two cells in it. The total combined capacity is at 5200 milliamps, which if you divide that comes out to 2600 milliamp hour batteries. The charging specifications look to have been upgraded with the RC2, as it now supports 9 volts and 3 amps, but if you stay on the surface, then this might look like an upgrade. However, DJI also still dictates that both controllers take the same exact amount of time to charge, which is 1.5 hours. It also looks like the RC2 does get 1 hour less battery life than the RC. DJI states that the RC2 will last for 3 hours versus the RC, which lasted for 4 hours. To give you an idea of what battery life is like between the two, the day before I did this video, I flew using both controllers. Based on my flight logs, I flew 94 minutes using the RC, and this was switching between the Mini 3 Pro and Mavic 3. If I remember correctly, my battery was down to 57% at the end of all of my flights. With the RC2, I flew for 91 minutes, obviously with the AIR3, since it's one of the only controllers that's actually compatible with it. After all was said and done, I ended up with about 40%. One other thing to keep in mind is that the temperature was in the 80s while I was using both controllers, but as you can already tell, the RC2 does indeed use more power despite having a larger battery capacity. This is about what I'd expect though. To embellish on this battery life talk and kind of to throw another random stat in here, I have been turning these controllers on and off during the production of this video, and as it stands right now, the RC is on 36%, while the RC2 is on 22%. Now, you do have to remember that there is now a fan upgraded CPU and GPU in the RC2, and basically it's just destined to be more power hungry. I'd imagine that this is only going to be something to worry about though if you are flying for 3 hours, but I definitely recommend traveling with a portable battery of at least 7,000 or 8,000 milliamps so that you can charge the battery in the controller. And if you're looking to charge the drone's battery, get something bigger. So near the beginning of this video, I did talk about compatibility, but I wanted to circle back around to this topic and talk about potential compatibility with DJI's other offerings. Just to reiterate again, the RC2 is at this moment in time not compatible with any other drone other than the AIR3, and that is due to the addition of DJI's new 04 transmission system, most likely. With this new transmission system, like I said, you do get up to a 20-kilometer range in the US, as well as a much more stable connection in areas that are congested with other wireless signals. If you're thinking what I'm thinking, then we're thinking the same thing, and you're probably wondering whether this controller would be backwards compatible with DJI's previous drones. If I had to speculate right now, and based on looking at specifications, I would say that there's a pretty good chance it would be compatible with anything between the MAVIC 3 and Mini 3 series. What I'm basing my answer on is the fact that if you look on DJI's product page for both the RC and the RC2, you'll see that in the transmitter power section, there are a couple of frequencies and Wi-Fi bands shown here. The areas that stuck out most to me are the transmission power section and the Wi-Fi protocol sections. Based on what I've seen here, I think that there is a very good chance that we will see backwards compatibility with DJI's previous drones. The transmitter power section under the antenna heading here seems to have some very similar specifications when you look at it at just a glance between both of these controllers. It seems as if it's simplified on the RC's page, but to me it looks like they're similar overall. When I moved down to the Wi-Fi section, I got a little bit more of clarity here, especially with me having an IT background. It looks like the original RC was using all Wi-Fi specifications up to Wi-Fi 4, whereas the RC2 is using up to Wi-Fi 6 specifications. The IEEE group that makes these specifications typically makes Wi-Fi specs that are backwards compatible. So if there is some way that DJI's drones are flying predominantly off of Wi-Fi specs or something similar, then I'd say that there's definitely a good chance that we will see some compatibility with their previous set of drones, at least up until the Mini 3 series like I mentioned before. Plus, it literally would not make sense for them to just make this compatible with one drone, seeing as how DJI is very good about only releasing a new drone whenever they have something new to put in it. If everyone decided not to get an AIR3, then that means they'd only be selling these controllers with the drone until they decided to release something like a Mini 4 or a MAVIC 4 series, which seems unlikely since they have like 1,000,001 versions of the MAVIC 3 series anyway. Anyway, this is all just speculation and I can't really prove any of this, but we will see what the future holds, and just hold your head up high and have hope, I guess. I am kind of hoping that somewhere down the line people will watch this video, and by that time I can probably post a comment, and I mean there's no reason I can't. I'll post the comment and state whether the controller is compatible, and we'll go from there. The last thing I wanted to talk about is the difference in sounds that both controllers make. I noticed that when turning on the RC2, it sounds more like it doesn't want to do anything but rest, while the RC sounds upbeat and excited. When flying the drone, the RC2's voice prompts sound less robotic and closer to being more natural. Obviously, me just talking about this though won't do anything, so let me let you hear what both of these controllers do sound like.
Approached edge of altitude zone. Home point updated.
Aircraft entered altitude zone. The home point has been updated. Please check it on the map.
Alright, so obviously there was nothing functional about that. However, I just thought it would be a fun fact to kind of point out, as well as, like I said at the beginning of this video, I aim to go in depth with the differences between these controllers. All right, so that is all I have for you on the differences, or at least every single aspect and difference I have found between both of these controllers. As you can see, the RC2 does bring some upgrades. However, in my opinion, of course, it does bring some downgrades, but either way, it's a welcome addition to the RC family and definitely still one of the choices, hopefully, that we will have for multiple drones if and when it does become compatible. Now, of course, I do hope that you did find this video helpful. I hope you learned something. You better darn well have learned something from here. And yeah, if there are any questions or comments, or just tell me what you think, or when the compatibility with, you know, the Mini 3 Pro and the Mavic series will come in. Anything you want to comment, anything you want to know, just let me know. Write in the comments. And I do have more videos on the Air 3 coming out. It's just a matter of which one to focus on at the moment, but look forward to active track tests. Look forward to, you know, samples of the 1X lens as well as the 3X lens and things of that sort. But with all that being said, wherever you are in the world, have a great day, a great afternoon, a great evening, or a great night, and I will see you in the next video. Thank you for watching as always, and thank you for the support.